everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Tracy Cook, and I'm the online media manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Storytelling in the Business Analyst, Part 2, Telling the Stories. Today's webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answer session at the end. Please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. And today's featured speaker is Steve Blais, PMP, PMI, PBA, author, consultant, teacher, and coach. Steve has over 55 years of experience in information technologies. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy, once again, and welcome everyone. In our previous episodes, kind of like one of those series on television here, in the last episode, we talked about getting the information in as a business analyst, bringing that information in, analyzing the information and turning it into facts, which then become requirements. Then it's not the end of it. We've got to then take those requirements and we've got to then present them to other people. For example, those who gave us the information in the first place, to management. We've got to sell them on the solution. We've got to explain the new process to users. And of course, we've got to tell the developers what's going on so that they can build the system. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode, which is part 2. Who are we going to talk to and what are we going to say to them? And most importantly, how are we going to say them? What's the best way of presenting this information, presenting the requirements? So what is it that you're saying? We are answering questions, basically. We're developing insights into the business. We get questions about conflicts that we may be able to resolve. We make or influence decisions for management. We define the way things are and evaluate all the potential solutions. We explain the business requirements. We define the solution requirements. We get people to agree with these requirements and say, yes, I'm willing to pay for it. We're willing to do it. And we're constantly being asked what's going on, but that's just in business. We are also asked a whole bunch of other questions for which we might tell stories. For example, what did you do over the weekend? You might say nothing, but we might also say we kind of lazed around the house and binged a bit of TV, and man, it felt so good not to have to do anything at all. We turned nothing into a bit of a story. But there are other stories. The teenage kid, how did that dent get in my car, son? And suddenly there is a story, probably a long, intricate, complicated story that is so far from the truth, but hey, it's a story. So why specifically do you want this job? Why do you think that you are the best person for this job? And of course, here comes a story. I used to tell business analysts in sessions, the question would be, how do you hire a good business analyst? What would make a good business analyst from somebody else? And I say somebody who responds to the question, what is your worst day as a business analyst, or what is your worst day at work, with a story. They tell you a story so that you can almost feel as though you're there. That is going to be a good business analyst, because we're all about telling stories. We might be answering the question, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? A famous old joke, and this is attributed to Joshua Heifetz or Rubinstein or one of those concert pianists or something. And the tourist comes up along the street and says to him as he's walking down there carrying his instrument, his violin or what have you, and says, "Excuse me, sir, how do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And he looks at him and says, "Practice, practice, practice." Right? But we're going to tell a story of how to get. If you give anybody directions, you're giving them a story of how to get there. You're not going to just say, keep going in that direction. You're going to say, go down and turn left at the McDonald's, keep going till the big red sign, and you'll see a barn, take a left there, and so forth. And of course, the answer to the question, where were you last night anyway, is always going to be some kind of story. In other words, you are in a storytelling situation a lot more often than you think you are. And I'm saying that primarily for those of you out there who are saying, I can't tell a story. I don't tell stories. We don't tell stories. Well, you do. We all do. And human beings are basically storytellers. From the caveman who drew pictures on the walls of the cave and told stories over the fireplace to today. We're always telling stories. It's the oral tradition of the human race. So here's our business analyst again, and she's got questions on her mind. Once again, Jack doesn't have the patience for a full explanation. I can't go through it in detail. How do I present this so that I can get his approval? How can I make sure that he understands it well enough to say, yes, I will fund it? Management never understands what we're doing. Why not? Why don't they understand what we're doing? They don't even sometimes understand we even have a problem that we're solving. The user experience analysts want to know who to create the interface for. Now, how do I describe a typical user to them? I've got the requirements, but the requirements don't necessarily say what the user is, and the user experience people can't derive that. How am I going to do that? How can I tell them that? I give the VPs all the facts. I even put some spreadsheets in there, and they just don't believe me. And I spent a long time preparing those spreadsheets. The boss just asked me to describe the project to the business stakeholders because I'm supposed to know more about it than anybody. Now what do? Now you may have found yourself in these situations, and you maybe have asked the same question, had the same panic, wondered the same things, or it may be something as simple as, I want to take Friday off, and what do I tell the boss? Which of the many stories do I have for taking Friday off am I going to use this time? So we're talking requirements. As we recall from the previous part one, we went into requirements, and we talked about getting the requirements from other stakeholders and what have you. And we wanted to get them not as requirements, but as stories. And we're going to do the same thing. After all, once you have the requirements, you've got to do something with them. Mostly, you've got to get them proved. You've got to get them passed on to the people who are going to build them. You've got to get them understood and confirmed. Now remember, requirements are facts. So here's our business analyst saying, okay, the hard work is done. I got the requirements document finished. All I have to do now is go back and we can review these requirements. I'm going to present to them the facts because the facts is all they need to see right there. Every requirement, it's objective, it's nonpartisan, it is free of all emotions and personal in it. It just says this is what has to be done, the facts. So I go to upper management area, and do you understand the requirements? And what you get back is, well, no, I don't really, if they tell you they don't really understand it, usually they'll say, yeah, okay, yeah, but could you just give me the elevator pitch, the 30, 40-second thing, or maybe an executive overview, something that tells me what the whole thing's about. I don't have time to read these requirements. Then you have the stakeholders. Okay, listen, here's the requirements. Let's go over them, and you can give me feedback. And the developers. Sure. Okay. Requirements. Just tell me what I need to know to build this thing. Wow. Okay. So our traditional way of doing that, getting them approved or getting them confirmed, is to just tell them what the requirements are. After all, it's what the stakeholders told us. They gave us the requirements, and there's no problem with that. I mean, they've got to approve them, right? The developers need the requirements. They always need the requirements. How could they develop without my requirements? I'm a business analyst. I'm the one driving the whole thing. If I don't have requirements, the developers are going to sit around not doing anything. Developers need my requirements. Well, yeah, besides, don't give me the stories business, Steve. There is no crying in baseball. There are no stories in business. That's the way it is. Well, besides which, I've worked for 3 weeks on these blaster requirements. They better like them the way they are. So it's the traditional approach. We go to requirements review meetings. I'm sure you have been in one or more requirements review meetings on one side of the table or the other. And the classic approach, I've been there many times, where you stand up and you present, or you get presented to Here are the requirements, starting with requirement number 1. I've been in companies, one of them's a Fortune 20 company, won't make a name of the drug chain in the United States, but the rule was that any requirements that came out of the business analyst group had to be read by the business analyst to all of the stakeholders, usually on the phone because it's a nationwide company and some people are all over the United States. Every single requirement looking like this. All right, let's move on to section 12. I'll go ahead and read this requirement here. Let me know if you have questions, comments, and changes on requirement 12.1.1.3. And I start reading the requirement. And I get a reaction, which is, hey, did you read this thing? Nah, why bother? He's going to read them all to us now, so why read them in advance? Yeah, that's not good, because the whole idea, don't you send your requirements out in advance so people will read them? So you get a good feedback when you have the meeting, but nobody reads them because you're going to read them to them. Why bother? Then you get, listen, I think you should change will to shall there. And you get somebody else says, what is this, a bunch of English teachers here? It's a good thing they're not complaining about punctuation. And of course, as soon as you think that, somebody says, you're going to need a comma there and a semicolon over there. And, I'm not sure if you can have the comma after the second thing. You say this, that, and the other. Do you put a comma there, the Oxford comma? And suddenly you're in this grammatical discussion as opposed to content, which is what you want. Right? And then somebody says, well, now we're on section 12, but I don't think I understood section 11. I mean, each requirement was okay, but not the whole thing. I don't have a feeling for the whole picture. And then, of course, somebody's sitting there saying, is it lunchtime yet? And it's time to get out of here. I wish I weren't here in the first place. Does this sound familiar to you? You have a wonderful requirements meeting, or does it kind of tend toward this? Well, there's another way of doing it. Don't tell them the requirements. Don't go over them. Right? You write it up. If a lot of organizations require that you have a requirements document. That's fine. It's a contract. It's a contract between the business. Somebody upstairs, vice president, will sign off on it saying, yes, this is what we want done. And over there in IT, somebody will sign off and say, yes, we understand what we need to be doing and we agree that we can do it. So we need that in writing, but there's nothing that says you have to present it requirement by requirement or even any single requirement. Tell them what the problem is in your own words, why it's important to solve this problem. What does it mean to them to solve this problem? That's how you start it off. These are the people that are affected by the problem, using personas, users, consumers, customers, actors. This is what we're going to do about it. This is how the solution will affect you, and done in their language. In other words, put them in the solution picture. Describe the detail, prototype, illustrate, any way to get them to understand what's going on. None of that involves reading requirements. You say, wait a minute, Steve. You tell me to tell them in kind of stories here, to do all this stuff. How do you do that? I'm not going to stand up there and say, well, once upon a time, and try to tell a story. We had this guy come into the office, and two people went to a bar, and Plato and Platypus went to a bar. And, well, how about paraphrasing? If you paraphrase, you're going to be telling the story. You say, okay, yeah, but what does that look like? Looks like this. Same group. Here we go again. This time I'm up there saying, all right, now in section 12, it describes the new cash receipts process. And as you can see by this mock-up screen here, our cash receipts clerk, Karen, first enters, and then she does this, and then this, and you can see that this will happen. And people are now saying, oh, well, that's not how I interpreted the requirements. But, I understand what he's doing, and I like that better anyway. I think I'll go along with it. Then you get, somebody else says, well, what if Karen is not able to enter that particular information? In other words, they're understanding exactly what's going on because they're personalizing it. They can actually see Karen. You say, well, who's Karen? Is that one of the receipts clerks? Well, funny you should ask, because those whisperers over there having a little side conversation. Says, who is Karen? And that's a cash receipts persona. Remember that? We set that up. Ah, yeah. And if you've ever worked with personas and you work with the UI guys, UX people, they're talking about these people as though they're real, actual people walking around the hallways. And they say, do you think Karen would like this? That's, they get the personas, and that makes it real for them. Makes it a story because it's about a real person, even though the real person isn't really real. And then somebody else is saying, wow, the time went fast. I can't believe it's lunchtime already, because they're interested in each individual story. Each section becomes a story. And they're interested in the stories. The discussions are much more content oriented. We're not dealing with punctuation. We're not dealing with spell check. We're not dealing with grammar. We're dealing with what is actually happening with cash receipts. Now, you got those other two, right? Like management. Tell them a story. This is what the problem is. This is why it's important to solve the problem. This is how much time we have to solve the problem. And this is why we have a constraint of time on the problem. Now, these are the solutions that we've looked at. This is the solution we recommend, and this is why we recommend it. And this is the other two solutions that we mentioned here, and this is why we didn't recommend those. And ultimately, this is what you get out of solving the problem. This is the return on your investment for funding the solution. Well, it's a story. We're not talking about requirements. We're not talking about we'll do this, then we do this, and if this, then do this, and if this, then no. We're keeping it up to a strategic level for management. A story about what is going on and how we solve this problem. And everybody wants to solve problems. Once again, as a human being, we have a predisposition to solve problems. So we have a part of our brain even that goes up there and solves problems. Well, that's what we like to do. So if we can start off with a problem and talk about a problem and talk about solutions, we wrap the management up in a story. You say, okay, that's 2 out of 3, Steve. What about developers? Not only do we have developers involved with stories, but we have them called stories with the agile folks out there, the user stories. But keep in mind, we do not have to use user stories. We can love user stories, love to use them. They're great tools, use cases, user stories, great ways of describing story. But we don't have to use an actual user story as a this and as a that. Here's the as a here, as a bank customer. The important part is the discussion with the developers. Getting the developers to ask you questions about the story so that you can answer those questions, and the developers who are telling me these questions are then recording the answers down, which become their requirements. I have sat on both sides of this table. I've written down what I need to do to solve this problem or to create this story. Those are my requirements. And nobody else can create those requirements for me better than me, because I know what I need to know to write the code. And that's the way it is with pretty much all developers. So basically, tell them stories. Think with a mindset of storytelling rather than functional requirements, non-functional requirements, system requirements, software requirements, user requirements, stakeholder requirements, solution requirements, transition requirements. Tell them a story about transition rather than writing transition requirements. Now, I'm not suggesting you go back to management and say, hey, you know, I got this webinar from this guy, Steve, and he said, we don't have to write requirements anymore. Most cases, you still have to write it. Remember, that's a contract. It's something that provides a baseline for us. I'm talking about when you make presentations, you're telling people about it. We're going to use stories. Now, in the second or third slide, I said there were other things other than requirements that we need to tell stories about. Those are data stories. Today, in today's IT world, we have less and less and less process-oriented stuff that we do as business analysts. We're not writing whole bunches of requirements. Much of the work we're doing is in answering questions, getting data together, identifying data for AI and machine learning. When you're answering questions like, what is the next big thing going to be in 2026? Should we, what time in the future, how many years do we have before we should start phasing out our primary product line? Where are our most biggest customers coming from in our customer base? How long can we keep this product going and keep people actually buying it at a profit? What point do we get where there are so few people buying our product that we're not making a profit anymore? What is a good price point to use for our customers without making it so high that they go elsewhere and making it so low that they don't feel it has any value? Can we go to pricing individually so everyone gets a different price depending on time and demand and so forth? Those are questions that management is asking today. Why? Because we can answer those questions with AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics, prescriptive analytics, behavioral analytics, big data, all of these things. But these are not requirement stories. These are not the stories that we've been telling all along. They are data stories, something a bit different. And this is where we're going to. These are the stories we're going to be telling more and more and more of. You don't have to be a data analyst. You don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to be a data anything. A business analyst can tell a data story. What is a data story? A method for communicating information. Well, that's just another way of communicating information for us, right? It's tailored to a specific audience. Well, that's what we should be doing all the time, anytime. We make a presentation to the stakeholders, we make a presentation to the consumers, we make a presentation to the CEO. We're tailoring that presentation to that specific audience with a compelling narrative. A compelling narrative. Okay. And meaningful visualization. Whoa, I have a PowerPoint presentation. I got the bullets up there and I walk through and no, that's what you're looking at on this slide is not visualization. It's a prompt for me to remember what to say, for you to look at and say, okay, he's talking about these things, he's elaborating on them, and this is kind of an outline of what he's saying. We're talking visualization, and typically with a data storytelling, we're talking about graphs and charts and so forth. Please don't automatically assume you got to go to your Tableau or your business objects or your Cognos or MicroStrategy to get those beautiful graphs out and all of that. Visualization can be a picture of any kind. Right? Pictures of the business analyst earlier. Give you a visualization. There's a persona of a business analyst. Gives you an idea so that you can actually see it and sense it. It means something more than if I just had the words business analyst in a box. And something else that we might not be used to as a business analyst is we want to produce actionable insights. We want to produce conclusions. We want to produce decisions. This basically, the data story becomes the last 10 feet. Or if you're particularly in retail business, telecom business, we talk about the last mile. That part of the overall process, the overall system that connects the system to somebody's house, right? The network connects to your laptop in your house. That is what we call the last mile. Same thing with delivery. You want something from Amazon, the last mile is getting it from the final delivery spot to your house. Now, we're talking about here the last 10 feet. of the analysis process. We can analyze and have beautiful understanding of the data. We can understand the process. We can analyze it and just do a wonderful job, eliminate all assumptions, their assumptions, my assumptions, and their assumptions. And I've got this great conclusion, and it falls on its face at the 2-yard line because nobody understands it. I don't present it in a way that will make them say, yes, we've got to do this. Or, oh, I hadn't thought of that one. Look at that. Aha. Yes, we can do that. And that will make us more money. That is the goal of the data story, to provide that. We'll look at some elements of that coming up here shortly. That's a data story. Data storytelling is the art of presenting those data stories, presenting the data within a contextual narrative. Here is what I have found out. This is how it fits into the big picture. This is why it makes sense to me. It should make sense to you. This is why it makes sense to all of us. The idea is to get us from data to action. But note the second bullet there. Combine rationality with emotion and empathy, not just the facts. As we talked about in the last session, we respond to facts one way with the frontal cortex. We respond to everything else, the emotion, with all our brain, not only the frontal cortex, but also the amygdala and the limbic system and so forth. We also want to present it with empathy. That's where we know our audience, so we present that. At the end, we want people to say, yes, let's do this, or no, we don't want to do that, or we ought to do this instead. At the end, if they stand up and say, okay, I don't know if you can hear my hands clapping here. Good show, Steve. It was a very nice. I liked your slides. They were nice. Some nice pictures. That was good. We'll see you around. Well, in that case, we didn't make it. It didn't work. We want the result to be some kind of action. Now, whether they actually get up and run out down the hall screaming, yelling, let's change the world, or they say, we'll get to this. Sometime there is some action. So let's look at these data stories. The 4 dimensions of a data story. First of all is time. It's always a good dimension to have. We certainly have time as a dimension in any of our data warehouses, for example. We want a reporting type story, stories about the past, time series stories, showing over time this is what has happened. So we can kind of get the idea. Oh, over this time we have this, and now we're at the present. What is going on? We can use this for predictive analytics. Run time series, run regression against the data, and then project out the smooth line that we have and say, that's what's going to be in 2026. We can get all of this data together and predict that in 2026, this will be the top movie of the year. Why do we want to know that? Because it's going to take us that long to make the movie. And I don't want to invest in a Western if Westerns aren't going to be selling in 2 years. We want stories about the present, descriptive analytics. What is going on right now? Not just looking at a report that comes in every month and on the 5th of the month, the report on the last month. We want data from all over and stories about the future, the predictive story. We want descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics to tell us, yes, this is what's going on, and this is most likely why it's going on. This is why you dropped 10% in sales. This is why you gained 10% in sales. Diagnostic analytics. And along with the predictive analytics, we want prescriptive analytics. Well, if you keep going the way you're doing, you're going to be dropping 10% sales by the end of 2025. This is what you might want to do about it. If you make this move and you do this and you do this, you might be able to prevent that from happening. Now, remember that in all of this data that's out there, there's no one answer. It's not coming up to say, This is what you must do. It says there's an 80% chance if you do this, you will be gaining money. If there's a 40% chance if you do this, you'll be gaining more money. There's a 30% chance if you do this, you will not gain money. There's a 76% chance, and so forth. That's certainly a lot better than nothing at all. The explanatory focus. It's a story that tells us what happened, why it happened, how it happened. This is the main point of our narrative. This is what we are here for. This is the point I'm making. This is the problem we want to solve. This is a linear sequence. This happens, then this happens, then this happens. Let me explain how this will work. Let me explain what has happened. Here's some data to show this in a picture, in an illustration, in a visualization. This is the call to action. We get to this point, and if we don't do this, this will happen bad. If we do this, this will happen good. The depth is a third dimension. How much time are we going to spend researching and how deep are we going to go? This will depend on the audience. For the executives, we probably don't want to go tremendously deep because we're talking strategy level. For the detailed people who are working with it, we might want to go a little bit more deep into it. It also depends on the data availability. I got to have the data. I can't go any deeper than the data will allow me. Now, there's interesting two examples here. We're going to look at the data. When we're doing data mining versus knowledge discovery. We've got terms as we're going out to see what that data offers to us. In data mining, we start with a question, we train the data, and use machine learning to do this, for example. We train the data, and that will get us the answer to the question. Most likely answer. I'm talking as though it's the one answer. The 80% chance is this, and there's 75% chance is that, and so forth. For knowledge discovery, we look at the data, we start having the data tell us things that it might expose to us. Aha moments. Oh, look at that. Hey, the typical, Thursdays and Friday nights, the people who buy beer also buy diapers. Big increase in both of them at the same time, a correlation there. Is there a causal effect? Now, CSI are small investigations, like CSI, the crime scene investigators, I think that's what that's called. Why did this happen? Let's get the data focused specifically on that. Instead of defining requirements, we're now going to define data. What data do I need to find out what happened? The Eureka stories are your knowledge discovery. Let's look at data and let's run the data through and have the data talk to us. There are your story methods. There's the reporting story. You got a survey-driven story, prediction, a what and why story, how to. There's your CSI. Eureka story is, this. Oh, look at that. There's also one other story, and that is good old requirements story. But that requires the mindset. We can look at all of these and say, yeah, I can see the story type of thing. I can see a start. I can see a middle. I can see an end. I can see a conclusion. I can see some emotions involved that we want to get to the end. I can see a feeling that if we do get to the end, we will feel better about it. We'll feel maybe satisfied that the problem is solved. We can adapt the same thing to our requirements story. So, okay, Steve, good. How do we go about doing it? I'm willing to listen to it a little bit here. Here are the areas of concern. First, we want engagement. We want to be able to engage the audience or engage the person one-on-one that we're talking to. And there's a difference in data storytelling one-on-one as in data storytelling one-on-many. There's a whole thing, one-on-one, you're not going to show them a slide, a presentation. One-on-many, you're probably going to show them a slide presentation. Who stands up in front of a group to make a presentation without having the PowerPoint behind them? If I didn't have the PowerPoint, I'd probably have index cards to remind me what to say next, because I'm old, I can only remember so much. But in either case, we've got to engage. The pictures we show, the way we show them, the voice and so forth, we've got to engage them. We've got to enlighten them, to bring about something into them to say, aha, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And we want to provide an explanation. Why does it exist? And why is that a real thing that we're talking about that caused that aha moment? So that picture we just showed a few minutes ago of the story in the middle here. If I combine narrative, I'm giving you a narrative now, with visuals, that provides engagement. And you can make the visuals bounce around the screen and all of that. Could be complicated, and it could be disconcerting, annoying. But we're going to get engagement because I'm occupying the audible, that's the narrative, and the visual, what you're seeing, parts of our brains. So we're getting engaged. If I combine the visuals with the data, that produces enlightenment. Here is the data that we're talking about, and this is what it looks like. I can give you a whole bunch of, spreadsheet full of numbers and say, where's our problem here? But if I graph that, suddenly one pops up very high over the others, and there's the problem. I can see it. I'm enlightened. Now we can say, aha. And that, and I'm sure you have looked at a graph and we said, now, yes, aha, I can see what's going on. And if I combine the narrative and the data, that explains what's going on. I'm telling you, but here's the data to back it up. Here's the data, and let me put it in context. This explains what's going on. So putting all three together, we have a data story. So what are the characteristics of a good data story? A clear narrative structure, moving from a start, basically a problem or a goal we want to achieve, through a linear structure of step-by-step and a logical narrative to an end conclusion that produces an insight. Now, one of the things about the insights, I just want to point out off the side here a little bit, is that we want the people who are listening to this, the person we're talking to, the audience, to come up with the insight. We don't want to say, okay, here's the first insight. Or now, you notice after I've talked about this, this is what we come up with. If they come up with it on their own, it is much more compelling, much more actionable than if you say, hey, here's an insight. Okay. I'm getting so excited, my hands are going everywhere, and I hit the keyboard every once in a while. We want their context that we put it in to be recognizable. That's where we bring up the personas, or we include the individuals. I do this many times. We're talking, and I'll put all the people in the room into one scenario, describing a story, and everybody has a part in the story. One person plays the vice president, one person plays the project manager. They're not actually doing anything, but I just use their names. And it makes it real. It's a recognizable context to put it into. It's visual. You've got the graphics and a picture, and it has emotional appeal. It's something that they can reflect, to react to. And it's believable. We don't want that believability gap, that credibility gap between showing them data and having them say, yeah, I know, I see the graph, but you know what? I don't believe it. I believe my gut instead. We want it to be so believable that they say, yeah, okay, I'll go along with that. What we're going to do as business analysts is ask the question, in one case, what data do I need to answer the question, what's going to be the top selling movie in 2026? What's going to be the next big thing that we can jump on board for products? Who's our biggest customer base from? We also want to ask the question on the other side is, looking at the data, what is that data telling us? What are the actionable insights? These are both analytics. These are both business analysis, because we're analyzing the business, but we're analyzing the data of the business. One case on the one side is data mining analytics, and the other case is knowledge discovery. Now, you say, okay, cool, let's design that visualization, okay? Start with the problem. Oh, yeah, start with the problem, Steve. You always start with a problem. Yes, I do. We always start with a problem as business analysts, and if we don't know what the real problem is, we then define the real problem, because that's our job. What is or are the questions that need to be answered? What is or are the problem that needs to be solved? Then we're going to determine the data needed to answer the question or solve the problem. If we have that data, where can we get that data? If we can't get the live data, what other data can we get to help resolve that issue? Then we're going to look at the business audience. Now, one of the suggestions is we divide it into smaller segments. You may not be able to have one illustration, one visualization, one presentation, I'm talking about part of an overall, say, 1 hour presentation, hit the middle spot of everybody. Everybody says, ah, but we can say, this is for this group. This is for that group. Rather than try to get the whole audience, because it's a rare situation where you have everybody in the audience, all are generally the same level and the same experience and the same everything. So look at the audience and break them into personas of your own. Choose the appropriate chart type for the question. Now, a lot of times you'll see them, when you talk about visualization, they say the appropriate chart type for the audience. Well, you know, pie charts are not going to be very good for the question, some questions, but be very good for others. And then you want to come up with a real esoteric type graph, such as the one in the lower left-hand corner there. I can't remember what that's called, but that's a graph that people might look at and say, "Oh, wow, that's a strange looking thing. I'm not sure what that means to me." And you end up spending half your time just explaining what the graph means. Well, that would be maybe the perfect graph for your data, but not for the audience. Then you might have kind of an older crowd that likes the bar charts. If you can get the graph out, the visualization to be reflective of the problem you're solving, that is even better. I saw once working with a bottling company, soft drinks and so forth, and they had graphs that were in their histograms weren't just bars going vertical on the page; they were actually bottles of their drinks going up based on how much they sold. That really gets it to empathize with it for the crowd. So the next thing we go to the detail level. What data needs to be tracked, measured, or described? What are the key insights that you want to convey? And again, you want to know what insights you want to convey without saying, insight number 1. Rather than that, you want to convey it with a graph that shows it. Right? Your insight is that every March, we have a major increase in sales. It goes up 40%. And we want to find out why that's the case. We're a green company and everybody buys stuff from us on St. Patrick's Day or something. What we want is to present the visualization and the information and have them sit there and say, look at that, every March. Wow, we can do something about that. We also want to minimize the distractions. That's the noise. We don't want a bunch of graphs out there. Well, they can get really attractive, almost addictive, because the beautiful graphs you can see. We talk about many kinds of different graphs that just are, knock your eyes out. That is gorgeous. And then it becomes hard because the 5 graphs you have all say the same thing. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. We want to provide the appropriate context for that data. We want to define the method used to generate the visualization. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to stand up there and say, okay, now this graph was presented by this way and this way. No, we're going to have it ready in case somebody says, okay, Steve, how did you get that anyway? We want to be able to say right away, this is how I did it, in a way that they understand. Not only go into okay, this uses a regression analysis, and we don't want to do that. We want to explain it in their language. We're going to think in terms for our visualization, for the data of projections, predictions, trends, problem solving, as opposed to thinking in terms of requirements for a system. Because more and more and more of our work is going to be in artificial intelligence, machine learning, all the different forms of analytics. Looking like this. There's a graph. And it answers a question. You look at that and say, oh, now, I don't know how many of you may be old enough to remember the question that we were all talking about. When did the music die? And Don McLean and his song said that it was kind of referring to Altamont as the time that music died, but here it is. But we're answering the question, when did the rock music die? And there's rock that kind of way up there at the top there, and then suddenly has a precipitous fall. So we can say, looks like around 1985 it started going down. And now it's down in the bottom, and other kinds of music are higher. We have the data, we can draw conclusions from it. This is somewhat attractive, a lot of nice colors and so forth. It draws your attention, but it also answers the question. If you ever had that question, I don't know if you did or not, I just wanted to bring up something that I thought maybe everybody might be able to relate to in some way or another. So in the end, we have data stories that are visualized. You say, wait a minute, no, the data stories was just the second part, right? No, here's the thing. The requirements that resulted from our information gathering. Remember, the information is facts. Facts is data. We put the data together in context to make it information. We analyze that information and we produce the requirements, which means that all requirements are essentially based on data, and therefore they're just as much data stories as anything else. And every other part of our communication with any other part of the organization, or for that matter, with any other part of our life, is also data stories. With that, I'll turn us back to Tracy.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks again. Thank you again for such a great presentation. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please type your questions into the questions box. And let's give everyone a moment to get their questions in. Okay, here's a question. Do you have any examples of good data stories?
I think of a reference I can give you, because if I were to tell a data story now, and I couldn't do it in the 5 minutes or so we have left. Let me see if I can remember how this goes. For sale. This is what we call a 6-word story. Okay, it's been attributed to Ernest Hemingway, but that has been kind of put aside. In 6 words, here's the story. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Your mind is putting together a story for that. That's just 6 words. But all of us, I would venture to say every one of us is coming up with a story, because our brain does that. It's got to be something behind that. That is basically a data story. The data is for sale. What's for sale? The baby shoes are for sale. And what about the baby shoes? They're never worn. So I hate to kind of make it that simple, but that would be an example of a data story. It has a beginning and end. It is based on data, and there's an emotional part of it. All it's missing is the visualization, but I'm sure that in your brain, you are visualizing it. there is a mailing list. And I apologize, I don't have the name of it. I can't remember. There is a guy who puts out a newsletter periodically, and he has statistics in it. In fact, I pulled that statistic from Billboard out of his letter, and he shows different ways of using data, and it's primarily knowledge discovery. So that would be a place to go. If you drop me a line, I have my email address there. I will try to, I will get that to you. I do have it, but I can't remember the name offhand.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question, do you see any issue making the storytelling clear? The general goal rather than requirements gathering, and to hold the team and or related stakeholders. So do you see any issue making the storytelling clear and to hold the team and or related stakeholders?
So okay, I'm going to answer it two different ways to make sure I catch either way I could interpret it. First is you've seen the issues of making it clear. Sounds like, are there any obstacles to making it clear? And the answer is that, well, yeah, there are obstacles, but all of the obstacles can be overcome by the person making the presentation, namely the business analyst. If we look at the data, and we get only the data we need to support, we present the only visualizations to support our contentions, the story itself, then it will be clear. In terms of if you're going to go from requirements to stories, and if that's the issue that you have, will our teams and everybody go with stories rather than requirements? I think that from my experience, every place that we have introduced stories telling rather than requirements, there's been kind of a big sigh, because they don't like sitting there for hours listening to requirements. They're so dry and boring. Even though they provided the information, now we're giving them the information back. But we give them back as a story. Think in terms of a movie where the actors and actresses in the movie go to the opening and see the movie for the first time. You'll hear them say, it's the first time I saw the movie. It's really great. And you say, oh, is that possible? You were in the movie. You were just saying the lines. You were, doing the emotion. You were walking around and all that. How could you not know what the movie was about? Well, they know what part they put in. The director put it all together, and now it's in a big holistic whole up there. And nobody who has contributed to their part has seen the whole thing. Well, all of the stakeholders have contributed a little part. You've asked them this questions and these questions. You got this much data from them. Now here's the requirements as a whole. So rather than imagine doing a movie, going to a movie and seeing requirements. We want to tell them what the whole story is. The developers and the stakeholders will breathe a sigh of relief to have a story rather than just good old-fashioned requirements. Again, with the limitation of the organization standards.
Excellent, Steve, thanks. And again, if anyone has any questions, just type them into the questions box. Our next question, what is the best way to present a story to the development team? Since we need to provide them the documentation.
I'm stuck on the word best. I don't know that there is any best way because developers are different, you're different, the situations are different. What might be really good one way might not work another way. Bottom line, generally speaking here, I've got the documentation. I'm going to present it to you. Here is the documentation. Let me tell you what this is about. I'm going to describe the scenario, if you will. This is what's going on. If they're developing a user interface screen from scratch, a brand new one, I'm going to describe how the users are going to use the interface screen. I'm a user. This is what I want to see. This is how I want to use it. This is what I want to get out of it. Now they have the documentation that I gave in a context of what's going to happen. Way back in the late 60s, early 70s, I would get assignments to write code, to produce a report, for example. And they would never tell me what the report was going to be used for, who was going to use it. Just, here's the form, government, here's the form, write this code. Then I'd write the report, there's the report, and okay, there it goes. Later on, when I became a program analyst, then I started being able to find out from the users what they were going to do with the reports. And it became a lot more interesting for me. And I was now able to participate and say, well, we might be able to do this instead. Something that, of course, the business asked for, but they didn't know you could do it. Now that I understood what they wanted, put it in context, how it's going to be used by the business, put it into a story. Now, we're now collaborating. We're working together. We're engaged.
Thank you, Steve. I think we have time for just one more question. So how would you recommend shifting organizational standards to implement storytelling?
Okay, I'm going to put my rebel hat on here, my undercover hat here. It's not going to be easy to convince management or those that are wielding the power of the policy that requirements are not necessary, that stories are better. Again, I fall back on the concept that the requirements tend to be contractual. We have to sign off, to go through a change process in order to get them modified in any way. That implies contract. So instead of fighting the good battle, but it's not a bad battle to fight, just do it. Just when you sit down with the users, tell them stories. Describe in stories. Ask them to tell you stories, as we discussed in the last part one. Get them to tell you stories. So, hey, tell it to me like I'm 6 years old. I don't understand cash receipts. So can you describe what goes on in cash receipts? And then you describe it back to them in a story. And then later, when the requirements are done, you describe what the requirements are actually going to do for them, as opposed to, what do you think about these requirements? Is the spelling right? Is the punctuation correct? Now you've got this underground thing going on of stories between you and the users, you and the consumers, you and the customers. Up here, there's still the policy. Requirements are still going to be written. I'm not, again, suggesting that you stop writing requirements. You need to codify what's going on for no other reason than for the future. But in our conversations and our discussions with everyone, we will find communication will increase. We get better feedback, better engagement by working with stories. And we can do that without having to actually change the organization. Eventually, if everybody starts talking stories, the organization will kind of go that way as well.
Excellent, Steve. Thank you so much. I think we are at the end for questions right now. So again, Steve, thank you again for such a wonderful presentation. A quick note, if you didn't see it in the chat, this is kind of part two. The first part of the session is available on the Modern Analyst website, which is Storytelling in the Business Analyst, Understanding the Stories. Just a reminder for everyone that today's session has been recorded, and that along with the slides are going to be posted to the ModernAnalyst.com website within a few business days. And that concludes today's session. We hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And thanks again, Steve. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.